right, so I have the privilege of introducing Natalie. Natalie was born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland. Actually, I'm gonna start with Sam. Sam's like the warm-up act, so I gotta start with Sam, right? I think that makes sense. So Sam Lipsyte was born in, I'm taking this from the website, so I'm sorry if I'm outing your age. Sam Lipsyte was born in 1968. He's the author of the story collections Venus Drive, named one of the top 25 books of the year by Literary Voice, or Voice Literary Supplement, and the fun parts, and 3 novels, The Ask, The Subject Steve, and Homeland, which was a New York Times notable book and received the first annual Believer Book Award. He's also the recipient of the Guggenheim Fellowship. He lives in New York City and teaches at Columbia University. And Sam will be leading a discussion with Natalie. And then Natalie was born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, and studied Russian language and literature at Brown University and in the former Soviet Union. She's written many books for children and teens, including How to Say Goodbye in Robot, The Secret Tree, and Confessions of the Sullivan Sisters. Her book reviews and essays have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Los Angeles Review of Books. She lives with her husband in New York City, where she occasionally plays bass in rock bands with other restless writers. To find out more about her, you can go to nataliestandiford.com, and I will turn it over to Natalie and Sam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. And I want to thank the KPL for having us here tonight. And it's wonderful to be here to help celebrate Natalie's fantastic novel. And I think we're going to begin just by hearing some of it. Is that right, Natalie?
Yes, I'm going to read a little bit of the first chapter and then a little bit from something later. The book is about Phoebe Hayes, who's 22, and she's just graduated from college. And she moves to New York with her best friend, Carmen. They move to the East Village, and they have a good time exploring their dark sides, running around the art scene and club scene. And they are having a really good time until everything starts to fall apart, and then their loyalty to each other is tested. So this is chapter 1, Going Underground, which I was really glad to hear that song playing before.
Yeah, that's right.
I love that song. I'm sitting alone in the apartment on Avenue A that Carmen and I first rented 1 year ago. The cats are here and her typewriter is here and some of her clothes, but she is not, and I wonder if I'm to blame for that. I wouldn't be in New York. I wouldn't be Astrid if not for her. For at least 2 years, maybe 3, Carmen has played a part in every decision I've made. What she would think, what she would do in my place. Would this attract or repel her? I considered these questions when choosing what to wear, who to date, where to work, where to live, everything. She wasn't the most beautiful or the most glamorous person I knew, but that was why I emulated her. She found ways to be fascinating without relying on those easy tactics. She had the seen it all attitude of a native New Yorker, and I wanted to see it all. I moved to Manhattan right after college graduation to the Upper West Side because Carmen lived on West 89th Street with a friend from Dalton, Sarita Feynman. I imagined Carmen would teach me the secret codes of the New Yorker, the 2 of us out on the town, people watching in Central Park and lounging around drinking beer the way we had in college. I found a room in a rundown tenement apartment on 87th in Amsterdam, only 2 blocks from Carmen. So I jumped at it, even though it was small, dark, dirty, full of roaches, overpriced, and came with 4 roommates. Robin Green, an assistant editor at a romance publisher, held the lease, which gave her the power to choose who would occupy which room and to kick out girls who didn't have the right attitude. She preferred wholesome young women like Mary Frank, a devoutly Catholic law student, and Chrissy, who had moved from Kansas in search of a job at People and a rich Wall Street husband. A flamboyant actress named Marin Berlin had sneaked in somehow when Robin's guard was down. Marin was my favorite, but she was hardly ever home. She'd just landed a part in an off-Broadway play, a drag melodrama called Medea on Mars. I called Carmen, who seemed delighted to hear from me. She immediately trotted me across town to her parents' swank apartment on Sutton Place. Her mother was a former actress, and her father was the famous avant-garde composer Leonard Dietz. Carmen knew Len and Betsy would like me, and they did. Parents always liked me. Back then, a mere year and a half ago, I looked like a girl who couldn't get into trouble if she tried. So this next short section is just more about being that girl who couldn't get into trouble if she tried. And so chapter 5, which is called Chanterelle, is the name of a restaurant that used to be like a very chic restaurant downtown. And later in this chapter, Phoebe goes on a date there, but not in this part. In middle school, I knew of a girl named Kiki who claimed she'd spent the summer as an Aerosmith groupie. Her mother was a belly dancer. Kiki could do a head slide, that I Dream of Jeannie thing where you move your head from side to side in isolation from the rest of your body. She was a grade ahead of me, and we weren't friends. She wouldn't have been friends with me. She smoked clove cigarettes and sipped Coke spiked with Southern Comfort out of a 7-Eleven cup. I practiced aerial cartwheels on the front lawn and translated picture books into French for fun. She lived in a world where 14-year-olds were groupies, and I lived in bubble wrap. When I got to college and read Lolita, I finally understood the difference between me and Kiki. She was a nymphette, and I was not. I lacked the necessary traits identified by Nabokov as an elusive, shifty, soul-shattering, insidious charm, and instead was doomed to be one of the dull, wholesome children Humbert Humbert despised. I'm not saying that I wish I'd been a teenage Aerosmith groupie, but in the lives of neglected kids who grew up too fast, as my mother liked to say, I saw, until recently, not pain, but glamour. To me, a girl who felt smothered, neglect looked like freedom. I spent my first months in New York wondering when something was finally going to happen to me. I wanted something big, good, bad, I didn't care, as long as it shook me until my head spun. Something to make a good story out of my life, and something big enough to recapture Carmen's interest. Then I met Ivan. Here at last was my chance at the seedy glamour I'd always yearned for.
And there is the beginning of the trouble.
Yes, an older man.
It goes all downhill from there. And that was a wonderful head slide, by the way. Yeah, I mean, this is such a great novel. Elizabeth Gilbert said she flew through the pages, and so did I. And it's about a friendship, right? But it's also about this bygone time in the East Village, and there are all these kind of, which is so vividly rendered, and there are all these other characters around Carmen and Phoebe that are so kind of beautifully rendered as well. The people at Plutonium, and the sort of, there are even some, I won't spoil it, but some, cameos by real life famous people that sort of glide through the novel at different times. And then others that are maybe stand-ins for famous people you can sort of recognize. And
Yeah.
it really all gels. I know this is the age of autofiction, but I saw this more as a throwback to a genre I've always loved, which is the thinly veiled autobiographical novel. And I guess I'm just wondering, when I know that, I've seen clips of you talking about how, this is based at least a little bit on your own experiences. And so I just maybe wanted to start with the East Village a little bit. And, when you decided to set a novel there, did you just kind of close your eyes and remember, or were you kind of going back and doing research as you went? And how did that all develop?
I found, like, at first I didn't remember that much. And then I found, once I started thinking about it, things came back to me. And also I kept a diary. So I reread that, which was pretty painful. Wow. So at first I just went off of my memories. But after a while, I started doing a little research, because this isn't really a thinly veiled autobiography, Unfortunately, I was not as daring at that age as Phoebe is. And instead of, Phoebe works in a nightclub as a fortune teller, and I based that nightclub on area, which I only went to a few times. I would have liked to have gone more, but I had a day job. I was an editorial assistant at Random House Children's Books, so I had to get up in the morning and watch my neighbors, go out for the evening at 11 or 12 at night, zooming off in their, day glow painted hearses and things like that. And I was so envious, even though I wanted to work in publishing and I liked my job, but I wanted to be the kind of person who would be a party girl, but I wasn't. So,
So what you're saying is you used your imagination?
Eventually, I mean, I did start off.
How dare you?
I mean, there are a lot of details that are things that I remember. And I did live on Avenue A between 9th and 10th during this time, which is where Phoebe and Carmen live. I actually was subletting from Louise Bourgeois' son, Jean-Louis Bourgeois, and his wife. They were in Africa because they did books about vernacular architecture. And so my boyfriend from college and I were subletting and living with their two cats and all these Louise Bourgeois sculptures everywhere, which was pretty cool.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I kind of am interested now in this diary, what that was like. We can talk a little bit more about going back into that.
I had to force myself because I guess it's a good thing that I pretty much wrote what I thought, but I was such a little jerk, I thought, when I reread it. Pretentious and trying so hard and worrying about all the wrong things and very insecure. And it was really painful to read it, but it did inspire me to go ahead and make Phoebe not entirely sympathetic, like let her be kind of a brat and a jerk and foolish, because I think that that's not uncommon in people that age, 22.
Yeah, it's almost necessary, but that's what being a kid is. And Phoebe is she's a great character because she's nuanced that way, I think. And she doesn't do everything right. And she also, it takes her some time, that's part of, I think, the novel is her kind of figuring out how some of the things that she thought were kind of presumptuous and maybe the wrong assumptions about people. And I really like that a lot. She's also, she has her share of pain too. And she's kind of an observer, but she's not a wallflower. She plunges right into the world, and she wants to make something of herself in it. And she gets herself into these scrapes. And there's a sort of, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the kind of really interesting revelation about her at the end. And another quite about, something that happened to her, I guess. And I guess I wondered, I had a kind of writer's question about that, which was that something you knew you were working towards, or did that kind of appear to you as you got there?
I want to make sure I know what you're talking about. Do you mean there's like a sort of shocking, violent thing that happens at the end?
Not a shocking, violent thing. There's a sort of, we find out that something happened to her after a bad thing happened to her. That we didn't really understand or know about until the end. That her reaction to something was far more. Her reaction to a tragedy was far more serious than we'd been led to believe.
Actually, no, I didn't know I was going to get there at the end. I was looking for some way to explain why her mother seemed so eager to keep her home and not let her go back. I needed like a strong reason for her not to go back to New York, which she does. She sneaks out of her mother's house after her father dies. Her mother doesn't want her to go back to New York, and she sneaks away and doesn't tell her mother where she is because she's afraid her mother's going to try to come and get her. And I needed to explain it somehow.
See, I was even trying not to give away the death of the father, but you did.
Well, I guess I didn't. That happens fairly early.
Pretty early.
No, I'm probably going to spoil everything. Also, I changed the order in which things were revealed so many times that I get confused about when did I.
That's so interesting because I was really tracking how you paid out the information, and I thought it was really well done and very clever, and like sort of set up these kind of nice emotional detonations as we went and carried through to the end. So however you moved it around, you got it right by the last iteration.
Thank you.
So yeah, and it's also about this friendship, and I guess I'm wondering, I've had a lot of people ask, well, is this character based on this person or is it based on that person? And I know how annoying those questions can be because it's always a mix of so many people and situations and things you've lived through and things friends have lived through and things you've read about and so forth.
Yeah.
But what made you want to write about this kind of friendship, I guess, would be a question.
It's so funny, like it's hard to remember way back then what I was thinking, but I do remember when I was in college being fascinated by people in this obsessive way who seem to know everything. And that is how Phoebe feels about Carmen. And Carmen is kind of a composite of people I've known who when I was that age, I had those kind of roller coastery relationships, fights, and we are best friends. Now we hate each other. We can't live without each other. And, so I mean, I particularly remember one like middle school friendship where I had this best friend. We were basically in love. And then in 8th grade, all of a sudden, she gave me a card with Simon and Garfunkel lyrics in it from, it's like, I can't remember the name of the song. It's like Time It Was and What a Time It Was. And said we couldn't be friends anymore. And I didn't know why. And then she said she wanted me to pull her hair really hard. And I said, I didn't want to. And she said, you have to pull my hair really hard. So I did. And then she got mad and ran away and said she wouldn't speak to me anymore. So like
That's a setup.
I shouldn't have done it. So I mean, I can't stop thinking about that actually. Like what was going on? I still don't know what was going on. But later friendships have had less dramatic scenes like that. And so I wanted to just try exploring it a little bit.
Yeah, and I guess this friendship in a way has a similar structure to the hair pulling. And I do see, Phoebe comes from the sticks of Baltimore, and, comes to the big city, and I guess Carmen represents all that is glittering and fabulous in New York at that time. And you're from Baltimore, is that correct?
That is true.
Okay, so that part is that has some autobiographical resonance, that coming to New York, and even though you're coming from a big city, you're going to a bigger city.
Yeah, I went to a friend's school and everybody's father was a doctor, which is nice. I mean, everybody in Baltimore is a doctor, basically, it seems like. But that's really different from, world famous composer or, director or actress of that kind of world. It seemed so fascinating and mysterious when you haven't grown up that way.
Right. So speaking of composer, there's a lot of kind of music threaded through the book, and that, kind of names of bands are dropped here or there. And I'm interested in like how, what your relationship to music and how it relates to writing. And maybe, I know you're a musician as well. So any thoughts you have on that?
One thought is, I guess, just about the importance of rhythm. People have said this before, but writing in order to have having a musical sense of the writing. And I usually write by ear. Like I I kind of hear the words. I don't see things so much as I hear someone's talking to me, and I write down that way, and I like for it to have a certain, it has to sound right, you know? But I don't write, and therefore I can't write with music or anything, because then I can't hear the voices. But I did make a playlist while I was writing to listen to during breaks of all the songs. Like I would be writing and songs would come back to me, and I think, oh, right, that song. And so I put them on a playlist, and it would just help me get into the mood, the right frame of mind, dance around the room. And actually, you can access it. It's on Spotify. It's called Astrid Sees All playlist.
Okay.
And there's also Astrid Sees All Part 2, because I couldn't stop putting songs on. It's like 5 hours of songs all together.
And Kevin is posting the link to that.
Yeah.
So everyone can listen to the soundtrack to the novel.
Right. If there's a song mentioned in the book and you don't know what it sounds like, it's on the playlist.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. So yeah, I mean, I really like what you just said about the kind of the sonics of the writing itself, of the prose, thinking about rhythm and thinking, but I hear it in your writing. You know, you're listening to your sentences, and they have this charge to them that's, you know, although you also have great, you know, it translates to great visual description, but we can hear this music. And, you know, I remember I was on a panel with that writer, Michael Cunningham, and he said, you know, well, writing should be 50% music and 50% meaning. And then I thought, well, I think we all have our different percentages, but we're kind of all on that scale of music and meaning, and we're trying to figure out, you know, what works for us. But I think it works really well in this book. And then there were just kind of moments in terms of just the music that's mentioned in the book. And I remember I was just thinking about a moment where Phoebe she's at college at Brown, and there are some RISD kids, and they're listening to Abbey Road. And I had this moment of thinking like, oh, they're listening to this old Beatles record. And then I realized, well, then in 1979 or 80, it wasn't that old. It was, you know, 10 years old. And you know, Nirvana's 30 years old now. Like, so that was the kind of thinking I was doing. And it was really interesting as bands get mentioned and music gets mentioned and cultural touchstones get mentioned in the book and people that, you know, were famous, then it really I kind of spun off sometimes in these kind of wonderful, scary, you know, internal meditations on time. So thank you for that. And,
that scene actually is a real scene that
happened.
Yeah, it was my senior year, and I was living on Meeting Street, and my room overlooked this RISD house, and it just drove me crazy because I had so much work to do, and they just seemed to be having fun all the time.
I think they were. I'm sure they were. Speaking of Providence, or Brown, RISD, Providence, I noticed that the name Nancy was dropped in there. And you don't bother explaining who that is. I thought that was a little, you know, tip of the hat to a certain crowd.
Speaking of music, I can't resist just the sound of it. Nancy.
Beautiful. For those who don't know, she was the daughter of the famous, notorious mayor of Providence, Rhode Island, named Buddy Cianci. And for reasons no one quite understands, he named his daughter Nancy Ann. So is Nancy. But and then I was interested in this Gatsby party, and is that something I went to Brown that later after you did, but I'd never heard of that. But was that something that was happening?
Not really. My senior year, we did have a big class party at that mansion in Newport. Sam's talking about a big party that Phoebe and Carmen go to, that's very exclusive and is thrown by all the rich, fancy people. And that didn't happen. It was a party where everybody in the class was invited. But I needed to make it exclusive for story reasons. Although my editor, who also went to Brown and who is a few years older than I am, she said that she went to a party like that, but that it was exclusive. It wasn't a class party. So I don't know. Maybe something like that really did happen.
Maybe it did. I was also really loved all the, I have growing up I grew up in New Jersey, so I watched a lot of Yankee games growing up and all of the Phil Rizzuto stuff. But I was interested because, you're a Baltimore Orioles fan, but a Phil Rizzuto aficionado. It's kind of an interesting place for you to be, a place to land. But
well, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
When I moved to New York in 1983, at that time, if you wanted to watch a baseball game, there wasn't really cable. You had to watch whatever was on the local TV. So I started watching the Yankees, and I became a Yankees fan, even though people have said you can't be a Yankees fan and an Orioles fan, but I disagree, you can be. And I really got hooked because Phil Rizzuto was one of the announcers, this former Yankees shortstop, and he was so funny. And the baseball was great, but also he just made it so much better. And I even bought his book. Did you know there's a book of poetry?
I remember that.
Yeah.
Also, he was on, he appears on Meatloaf's Paradise by the Dashboard Light.
That's true. I mean, I don't know if it really, it's so different from the rest of the book, all that baseball stuff, but I don't know. I wanted to be sort of like a little Greek chorus or something that Phoebe.
Well, it actually kind of was a constant reminder of the grief underneath everything. And
oh, yeah.
Worked beautifully that way. I guess I have a question about, I know you've written a lot of young adult, and this is, I guess, being called an old adult or whatever the category is. And I don't really understand the difference. But I wonder, what goes through your mind thinking this is not like the others, this is different. How do you approach it, knowing that it's a different category, I guess?
One thing that was hard for me was, I guess I have like a little internal, I don't want to call it a censor, but like a meter who's thinking, is a 14-year-old going to understand this? Is a 14-year-old going to know this reference? Is a 14-year-old going to be freaked out by this? And I had to turn it off while writing, and it sometimes would pop back up like, I can't write about people doing heroin. What if some kid tries it? But so it took me a while to get used to that. But I think when I'm writing for kids or teenagers, the character is that age and the story is told for someone who is that age as well. And assuming that the reader has only as much experience as the age that the book is meant for and not more. But writing for adults, it was freeing because I just assumed that everyone had enough experience to understand what I was referring to and I wouldn't have to explain things, which was nice.
Yeah, and I guess there were a couple sentences that I guess could not just be in a book for, not even like subject, not even just, what they were doing, but just the words that were being used, I guess. But I thought that, I don't know. I guess my question is, what were you reading when you were 14 that made you want to maybe write someday?
I was reading, all the stuff we read for school, like Hemingway and Fitzgerald, and I loved all that. And we read Virginia Woolf a little bit and Faulkner. And then I would read books like the biography of Winston Churchill's mother, that kind of thing for fun. But I really loved Hemingway at that age. And it's funny because last night, the bookseller who was hosting the event that we did said that this book reminded her of The Sun Also Rises. And I was surprised to hear that, but it also really rang a bell because that's my favorite Hemingway novel. That's the one I read in 10th grade. And I remember really loving the way there's all this pain underneath this surface of glamour, and how the glamour it makes it more fun to read about the pain. And I did consciously think about that when I was writing this book, that I wanted to write about a glamorous coating over pain.
I think that's a great way to put it. And I like the comparison. I think it works.
I don't feel like I can go around saying that.
Well, I think let other people say it. And I'm glad people are, saying it. I recently had a student who said to me, wait a minute, Hemingway, that's the misogynist, right?
Yeah, well.
Yeah, but some other stuff too.
But
Anyway.
It is true that Lady Brett, I remember thinking in high school, like, I guess I'm supposed to be Lady Brett. But,
right.
What if you told the story what if Lady Brett told the story? What if, Daisy and the Great Gatsby told the story? And actually, I think someone is publishing a novel like that soon. But I guess as a girl, I felt like that's how I wanted to approach writing, or how I had no choice but to approach it.
No, but I think you kind of do it wonderfully here in capturing these, young people in this edgy world, that's filled with a lot of glamour, and as you say, a lot of pain and a lot of self-destruction and a lot of, growing self-knowledge. And it's, the thing about these kinds of experiences that I think the book really captures is, it's not, all's well that ends well. There's some wreckage,
Yeah.
It's not even though, the characters go on for the most part, there are scars, and there's stuff that will trail Phoebe the rest of her life, but we hope make her a wiser person too.
Yeah, I as you said earlier, I think that it's a phase that people have to go through in order to grow up. And one thing I was thinking about when I was writing was the myth of Persephone, how she's this young girl who's kidnapped by Hades and taken to the underworld. Her mother's searching for her. And eventually she comes back after she's become queen of the underworld. And I kind of wanted to write a version of that, except that Phoebe doesn't get kidnapped. She wants to go to the underworld.
She dives right in.
Yeah, I think she feels like she needs to do that. And I think I felt that way too at that age. Like, I want to experience everything.
If there's a Hades, maybe it's Bix.
Yeah.
I haven't read the book yet. Bix is a great character, another great character.
He was a little bit inspired by Rocket's Red Glare. Did you know?
Yeah, I know who that is. Yeah.
He was a character actor in Jim Jarmusch's films, and he was sort of a mayor of the East Village when I was living there. Just kind of, you'd see him around, and he was a nice guy, like an amiable presence, and kind of a mess. He's died.
Yeah. And there's sort of a Jim Jarmusch type guy lurking around there in the book too.
Yeah. Well, he looms so large in my imagination as I was a huge Stranger Than Paradise fan when it came out. I loved it so much. And so I was really fascinated by him, and he is so cool.
Well, he did have that hair.
Yeah, he still has it.
Still has it. I love a lot of those movies too. Let's see. I guess I wanted to ask you about I think people have questions, so we'll go to those in a moment. But I'm intrigued by, just full disclosure, I've known Natalie for a long time. But a lot of the stuff we've never really talked about. So it's nice to talk about all this stuff. And also the kind of the Russian angle I'm interested in. You studied Russian in college, and you went to live in the former Soviet Union, is that right?
Yeah, I actually wrote a young adult novel based on what happened there called The Boy on the Bridge.
Oh, I'll have to read that.
Don't be put off by the cover.
Okay. Well, as people probably know, we don't always control our cover. Although I really like the cover to this. What do you think?
I love it. That photograph is really great. It's he's a street photographer. The guy who took the photo, what's his name? Bruce Gilden.
I know that.
And he apparently found some like 200 rolls of film that hadn't been developed from the 70s and 80s not long ago, and developed them, and then had a big show of all of this street life photos that he had taken back then.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
All right. So do we have questions from the crowd?
Yes, we do have some questions. First question I have here is from Elise Broach, and she says, "Hi, Natalie. Can you talk about how the story changed as you revised it? What were the most important changes, and what stayed the same from the very first draft?"
That's a good question. I definitely started just putting down like scenes of whatever I could remember, people that I remembered, things I remembered seeing, and it was much more autobiographical in the beginning. But you know, and then I would revise it, and it just didn't work. And every time I revised it, it became more and more fictional. And I learned, and I've learned this before with other books, like once the characters really aren't based on anyone and take on lives of their own, that's when finally it's starting to work. And also once the stories aren't things that happen to me for the most part, but their own things. But there are a few small things that did stay the same. As I mentioned, like the scene where Phoebe is watching the RISD students cut each other's hair while she has to write 3 papers. Trying to think. Well, I did work in a bookstore when I first moved to New York, as Phoebe does, briefly. And there's other stuff maybe I don't want to reveal.
Have you had people ask you if, you know, a certain part of the novel is based on something that they maybe told you about, or is something that happened to them?
Not yet, but the book just came out yesterday, so not many people have read it yet. So I mean, maybe I will. Has that ever happened to you, Sam?
Yeah. I was once got a call at, you know, midnight, and it was 3 people I knew who were all drinking together.
Ooh.
And they were saying, you know, which one of us is this character? We have a bet going. And I gave them that lame composite speech that we all give to people.
So there really was one of them was the character?
There's more one of them than the rest, yeah.
That's funny. So I have another question here from Margot, who asked, "What is your writing routine like? Was your process different for Astrid Sees All than for your books for younger readers?"
My writing routine is usually like I get up and do emails and stuff, and I have a little studio where I go to work, and I don't usually get there till after lunch. So I work in the late afternoons, which seems fairly unusual. I hope I'm not missing out on good morning energy, but I just can't do it then. So I write for a few hours there, and then I come home and have supper. And it was the same when I wrote my children's books as it is now, or as it was for writing Astrid. Because even my children's books are novels, so it's the same process of like sitting there and pounding it out.
Yeah.
Sitting and sitting and sitting.
Well, Daniel Pink says that all of us have different biorhythms, and so some of us can perform creatively better in the morning and the afternoon. You just might be an afternoon person.
I guess, yeah.
I am too.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I mean, I think my best writing hours are somewhere between, 3 and 7 or 3 and 8 or something like that.
Yeah, me too. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It would
So,
be nice to get it over with, but
so I have
Do you
another.
like to, wait, before we go to the next one, do you like to, because I just want to know this for my own edification. Do you, I always have to get everything out of the way. Like I can't start writing until like I've dealt with all the errands or whatever stupid stuff has to happen that
Yeah.
day. Are you like that? Yeah.
I am like that, right? Nothing can be hanging over my head,
Right. Yeah.
which is really bad because sometimes you don't get to the writing.
Yeah. No. Then. Yeah.
That actually would be an interesting book in itself to figure out or to ask a bunch of writers their writing routines and see how they match up to, I like this idea that you can't get anything done until you've got those things taken care of. It makes a lot of sense. So for certain types of people. This is from Sarah. I know you're a fortune teller, not an advice giver, but what would you give a young woman what advice would you give a young woman moving to New York City in 2021?
Ooh. I don't know how qualified I am to give advice to this young woman, but I guess I would just say, don't worry, don't be afraid. It'll be okay. You're going to make it. And try whatever you want to try. Like, I guess if you're looking for a job, just, take whatever you can get and don't be afraid that you'll be trapped in it because you won't. Like, you can never tell what will lead to what, and everything's going to be okay.
Sam, anything to add, fellow New Yorker?
Have some money.
Well, yeah, that's useful, but not too much money.
No, I'm just, it's harder. I feel like it's a lot harder now than say when this book takes place, but it still can be done.
Yeah, but people say that, but I didn't find it easy to pay my rent back then. I mean, when I worked at Random House, I made $12,000 a year.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's always a struggle.
And so even $600 a month was a struggle for me to pay, but so it's all relative.
I guess that's true.
A question from Delphine. If you were sent to an island in the middle of nowhere for 3 days, what would you bring? I don't know if you know this person or not, but it feels like
I think I know who she is. I think she is that mythical 14-year-old that we were talking about before.
Gotcha.
You mean besides necessities, I guess, like toothbrush or something. I would bring some kind of musical instrument that I could practice. Maybe a guitar, which I don't know how to play, but I would figure it out. And I would bring something good to read and some paper to write on.
Nice.
Sunscreen and a hat.
I think that probably a little bit more than 3, but I think that'd be okay. Let's see. We have, who do you read for fun and inspiration?
I love so many writers, but I really love Rachel Cusk lately. I like to read Sam's books and his stories when they're in the New Yorker, especially Dungeon Master. That's one of my favorite stories. And I like to read Miranda July's stories. She's amazing. Her mind is just works so differently from how mine does anyway, from how I would expect it to. And I've been on a rereading Muriel Spark kick lately. I really love her.
Oh, she's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, she's so dry but funny and just amazing. And she hits you in the heart somehow at the end of her
The
book.
coldest way possible.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier about, well, you guys talked earlier about the intersection of music and literature and the music and stories. So my follow-up to that is, what are you listening to now? Because I know you're a big musician. And what maybe did you listen? I know you listened to what you listened to during writing this book, because it's a great playlist. I've been listening to it on Spotify like all week.
Okay.
And I really, first of all, I just want to gush a little bit. I just love the fact that you and I have like the same New Order songs that we like the most. I was like, oh, I love it. But so yeah, so what do you listen to now? Like what inspires you now music wise?
I do like to listen to new music, but I don't listen to as much new music as I think I should. And actually, as I've gotten older, my interests in music have gone backwards in time. So like today's Billie Holiday's birthday, and I was WKCR, the Columbia University station, plays her all day long on her birthday, which I mark it on my calendar every year. And I was listening to her all day. And I love, old standards and Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald and Blossom Dearie and all those kinds of things. But I have very Catholic tastes. Like I'll listen to classical music and I'll listen to pop stuff or whatever.
So am I mistaken? Didn't you write something about Bruce Springsteen?
Oh, very good research. Well, yes, actually today LitHub published this essay I wrote, which was, I can't remember what they titled it, but it's basically about how I was feeling blocked while writing this book and turned on the radio and Bruce Springsteen's song Jungleland came on, which is this very emotive song where he howls at the end. And he is a very operatic story. And he even says in the song, there's an opera out on the turnpike, there's a ballet being fought in the alley. And I just started thinking, like, I shouldn't hold back. Like, I decided to try to let myself be freer in that way and be more operatic and a little bit beyond reality, because that's what art is. It doesn't have to be strictly realistic. It can be bigger than that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the distortion that sort of gets you to the real thing, I think.
Yeah. But even though I had Born to Run in high school and I really love that album and I love Bruce Springsteen, I'm nervous that I'm going to be so, like, it doesn't seem cool to me.
Well, I struggled with this my whole life because I'm from Jersey and I loved Bruce Springsteen and I had every lyric memorized and all that stuff. And I always, then I met cool people and I had to sort of justify myself by, well, he appears on a Lou Reed record and wrote that Patti Smith song. he wrote a song for the Ramones, although he recorded it himself. I mean, so I was constantly trying to fit him into the cool pantheon. Now I've just accepted, you can think what you like about him. And I guess he is kind of in a little bit of trouble right now or something, but
yeah.
He made some great records.
Obama likes him, so.
Yeah, they do a podcast together, so that should be okay.
Yeah.
All right, any more questions for Natalie or Sam?
I can tell fortunes, like I have lots of movie ticket titles.
So that was that something that you made up for the book, or is that a real technique, or tell us about the fortune telling?
I made that up. Phoebe was a palm reader, and that was so hard to make interesting, like different lines on somebody's palm. And then I was listening to some podcast where a tarot card reader was being interviewed, and she was talking about how you could use anything as tarot cards. And she had a friend who used movie ticket stubs, and I went, I'm going to steal that. Mm-hmm. So I did. And it made it so much more fun to do the fortune telling scenes.
That was great. I thought that was such a great thing to have her be doing, a great way to have her be a fortune teller. And I'd never heard of it before, but it was so, because then you got to play with all the movie titles. And,
yeah.
Well, and it also gave some more insight on the character that you never might have gotten. Like the movies people watch really tell a lot about them in some ways. So that was really fun.
So I do want to say that if you go on my website and sign up for my newsletter, you can send me a question and I'll do it. I printed out a whole bunch of movie titles and I put them in this box and I can shake it up and pull 3 out and answer a question.
Somebody wants you to tell Sam's fortune. Trish Todd does.
Oh, she's my editor. Do you have a question? Are you wondering about something, Sam?
Let's see. Will I have a good week?
Okay, let's see. Don't look. This isn't a complete collection of all the movies I've seen, and it's on the older side, the titles just saying. Okay. First, we have The Invisible Man. So your week will start off, maybe you'll be feeling invisible, but sometimes the three of them comment on each other.
Maybe that's the mask that I wear when I'm outside all the time.
Second, we have, ooh, don't look back.
Okay. I think it's going to be a bad week, but then it's telling me I can just move past it afterwards.
Here's number 3. Oops, I dropped one. It's a Wonderful Life.
Yay.
Oh, yes.
So I think you're going to have a great week,
Thank you.
at least by the end of the week.
That's great.
And that's the skill that Phoebe, aka Astrid, has, which is to always tell a pretty good fortune, so people keep coming back.
Yeah. She definitely tries to please the customers. Yeah.
Definitely. Anybody want their fortune told? Anybody else? You just raise your hand. You can click the little raise your hand icon, and I can unmute you. Anyone? And people are afraid of your powers, I think.
Yes, it's scary. What if it comes true?
Oh wait, MJ does.
Okay.
MJ, I allowed you to talk, so go for it.
Okay, I want to know if I should keep writing this book.
Okay. Can you say anything about what kind of book it is?
It's a murder mystery.
Okay, that's interesting. All right. First, East of Eden. I'm gonna wait and see what else comes up. Oh no. Story of menstruation. That's blood.
Yeah.
And now, the Atomic Cafe. So I think this is very violent and explosive, these answers, but I think that's good because you're writing a murder mystery. So I think you should keep doing it.
That's totally legit.
I agree.
I do too.
Thank you.
I probably would have said that even if I hadn't pulled the fortune.
Anybody else like to
Good, Martha.
have their fortune told? Raise their hand and I can unclick you. I think we have time for one more.
What about you, Kevin?
Oh.
Yeah, what about you?
Oh, okay. Let's see. Will the Tigers beat the Yankees the first time they meet?
Ooh. I have skin in that game.
I know. I hope you didn't see my comment earlier when you guys were talking about the Yankees. I was like, no one should like the Yankees.
No, everyone hates that.
Kevin.
I taught my children to call them the Crankies in our house. So.
All right. Hester Street. That's in New York.
Yeah.
That's a vote for the Yankees.
I think so.
A Raisin in the Sun. Let's see what the next one is.
Should be Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Place in the Sun.
Oh.
So, since you want the Tigers to beat the Yankees, I think the Tigers are going to end up with a Place in the Sun.
Ah, thank you.
Are they playing in New York?
I don't remember when the first time they played.
Tigers like sun. So
Tigers like fun, exactly. Good call. Thank you. Thank you.
I hate to say it, but I predict the Tigers will beat the Yankees.
At least one. I mean, the first time at least, probably.
The
All
first game.
Well, we have come to our hour of time together, and I really, really appreciate both of you for sharing it with us tonight. It's been great. I tell you, I love that book, and I'm super excited that we got to kind of, you know, be one of the first libraries to talk to you after the release, and it's good to meet you, Sam. And if you haven't read the book, like I said, our local bookstore is going to have it, and I can't remember the name of our local bookstore. It just left my mind.
It's called Here Are Books or something.
This is a bookstore.
Yeah.
I don't know why I forgot. It's called COVID Brain. We have a new survey vehicle. So if people could please fill out the survey go to the survey, fill it out, share your thoughts on today's program. If I can get it up, there we are, finally. There's the link. It's www.kpl.gov/survey/ a bunch of numbers and letters. So I'll leave it up there so you can write that down. And again, we have, and I'll run this PowerPoint for the end of the time here so people could see some of the other upcoming events. But any final words, Natalie or Sam?
I want to say thank you very much, Sam. It was so fun to talk to you. And thank you so much, Kevin and Kalamazoo Public Library. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks. And again, I want to read, if you didn't see it in the slideshow, if you want to hear more about Natalie, you can listen to our podcast. It's called 5 Author Questions, which hopefully someday Sam will be on, where we delve into the mind of writers with delve into the mind of writers using only 5 unusual questions. So the podcast is up. Episode number 5 dropped today, and we're super excited about it. So give it a listen. It's at www.kpl.gov/podcasts, but it's also on Apple and Spotify and all those other places. So thank you so very much, everyone, and have a very good night. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Sam.
thank you so much.